Hello everyone, I'm really glad you're here. Tonight, I want to help you let go of the day and ease into rest. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and it means a lot to be part of your nightly routine. So, if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin. Story 1. The night we saw the car in the woods. It was one of those nights that starts out completely ordinary and ends in a way that reshapes how you see the world around you. My two friends and I had decided to drive out past the edge of town, out where the highways thinned and the roads turned into gravel. It was something we did every few weeks, a tradition of sorts. We'd pack some snacks, fill up the car with gas, and cruise along the old back roads with the windows down and music playing low. There was something comforting about those nights, being far from city lights and surrounded by trees and stars. This night was no different, at least not at first. We stopped by the gas station for drinks, picked a direction at random, and drove for nearly an hour until the signal bars on our phones started to vanish. That was when the road narrowed and the forest thickened, and we knew we were getting close to the kind of darkness that only exists when you're far from everything. The road we followed had no name, just a jagged path cutting through endless trees, with branches leaning so low they scraped the roof of the car as we passed. We were laughing about something dumb one of us had said, the kind of light, stupid humour that fills the silence when you're feeling relaxed. Then, out of nowhere, we noticed a strange turn-off on the left. A path barely visible beneath the brush. It wasn't marked. There were no signs or indicators. Just a trail leading deeper into the woods. We'd never seen it before, even though we'd taken that same road several times. Curiosity got the better of us. We slowed down, exchanged a few looks, and decided to check it out. We figured it might lead to an old hunting cabin or some forgotten campsite. It wasn't unusual to find abandoned structures out here, but what we found instead was something far stranger. The path twisted and narrowed, and for a while we thought we might have to back out entirely. But then the trees opened up into a small clearing, and sitting in the center of that clearing was a car. A silver sedan, older model, with a thick layer of dirt covering the windows and windshield. The headlights were off, the doors closed, and it didn't look like it had moved in a very long time. At first we thought it might be abandoned. Maybe someone had left it there years ago and nature had just swallowed it up over time. But then we noticed something strange. The tire tracks were fresh. You could see the pattern clearly in the dirt leading into the clearing. That car hadn't been there long, maybe hours, maybe less. And that's when we realized there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. We couldn't see their face clearly. The windows were fogged slightly, and the way the car was positioned left most of the front end in shadow, but we could see the outline of a person. They weren't moving, they weren't reacting to our headlights or the sound of our engine. They just sat there, completely still, as though frozen in place. We turned off our music, rolled the windows halfway down, and called out, "No answer." My friend honked the horn lightly, just one short beep. Still, nothing. The figure didn't shift. Didn't look toward us. It was unsettling, that silence. It felt like we had stumbled onto something we weren't supposed to see, like we had interrupted a scene that had been frozen in time. My skin crawled as I stared at the car. The forest, which had felt so open and calm just moments before, suddenly felt oppressive and tight. One of my friends wanted to get out and check on them to see if they were okay. Maybe they had fallen asleep or passed out or needed help. But something deep in my gut screamed not to. I've ignored my instincts before, but this time I couldn't. I begged him not to go, told him something felt wrong, something about the car, about the figure inside it. It didn't add up. Why park in a hidden clearing? Why sit motionless for so long? We argued for a moment, quietly, not wanting to make too much noise, and finally he relented. We decided to back out slowly and call the police once we had service. But as we reversed out of the clearing, our headlights swept across the trees, and we saw something else that made us all fall silent. There were other tire tracks, older, more faded ones, leading in from different directions, as if this wasn't the first car to find its way to this place. We drove in silence for a long time. No one spoke until we were several miles away and our phones started buzzing with notifications again. We called the local police department and told them exactly what we saw. We described the car, the person, the clearing, everything. They asked for coordinates and we gave them the closest road markers we remembered. The officers said they would send someone to check it out and thanked us for the report. That was it. No follow-up, no callback, nothing. Days passed, then a week. We searched online for news about the car, missing persons, criminal reports, anything that might connect, but nothing ever came up. No trace of that car, no mention of someone found in the woods. It was like the place had never existed, or worse, like it had swallowed whatever we saw and sealed itself shut again. What haunted me most in the weeks that followed wasn't the silence from the authorities or the mystery of the parked car. It was the image of that motionless figure, sitting so still, not even acknowledging our presence. Were they asleep, hiding, watching us through the fogged glass? Sometimes I wonder if they were even alive, but then I remember how the windshield was fogged only slightly, like from breath, like someone had been sitting in that cold car for a long time, exhaling slowly, waiting. I don't know what we interrupted or if we interrupted anything at all. Maybe it was always meant to be that way. 3 kids out for a drive, stumbling into something that would leave them questioning what was real. Something that couldn't be explained or found again. We never went back. Not even once. Every time someone brought it up, it was quickly dismissed. Not because we didn't care, but because we didn't want to open that door again. There are places in the world that exist between the normal and the unknowable. Places that don't show up on maps and don't respond to reason. That clearing with its single silent car and breath-fogged windows was one of them. I can still see it if I close my eyes. The way the trees bent just slightly too close. The silence that fell like a curtain. The overwhelming sense that we were not supposed to be there. Sometimes I wonder if the figure was waiting for someone. Sometimes I wonder if we were supposed to be that someone. The lesson I took away from that night wasn't one of fear exactly. It was caution. A quiet respect for the things that live just beyond understanding. Not every strange encounter ends in violence. Not every mystery needs solving. Some things are meant to be glimpsed, not touched, observed, not confronted. That car in the woods, whatever its story was, didn't hurt us, but it changed us. It reminded us that even the most familiar roads can lead somewhere unfamiliar, that sometimes the forest holds more than just trees, and that if you ever find yourself facing a still figure through a fogged-up windshield, listening to the wind rustle branches above a car that shouldn't be there, turn around and don't look back. Story 2. The Man in the Motel Parking Lot. It was a few years ago when I was driving across the state for a last-minute family emergency. It wasn't anything dramatic, but it required me to pack quickly and get on the road before dark. I wasn't in a rush, but I didn't want to arrive too late, so I ended up splitting the trip into 2 days. I planned to stop for the night in a small town along the highway, where I'd booked a cheap motel room. It wasn't much, just one of those roadside places with old neon signs and dim lights flickering above each door. The kind of place where the parking lot stretches like a horseshoe in front of the rooms and the ice machine buzzes loudly through the night. I checked in at the front desk, got my key and parked directly in front of my room. It was quiet, almost too quiet. A single car sat 3 doors down, but I didn't see anyone else. The air was still, the sky dark except for a single buzzing light above the office. I told myself it was fine. After hauling my duffel bag into the room, I double-checked the locks and drew the curtains closed. The room was exactly what I expected. Dated decor, a slightly musty smell, and the faint hum of the ancient air conditioner. Still, it was clean enough, and I was too tired to care. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through my phone to let my family know I'd stopped for the night, then changed into sweatpants and a hoodie. I wasn't hungry, but I figured I'd grab a drink from the vending machine near the office before turning in. It was just a short walk across the lot. I put on my shoes, stepped outside, and immediately noticed something strange. The car, parked a few spaces down, dark blue, rust along the bumper, now had its driver's side door wide open. There was no sound, no voice, no movement. The lights were off, and I couldn't see anyone inside. I hesitated, then tried not to think too hard about it. Maybe someone had just forgotten to close the door. Maybe they were inside grabbing something and would be right back. I kept walking, but when I reached the vending machine and inserted a few coins, I heard something behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the ground. I turned quickly. The man was standing in front of the open car door, staring straight at me. He wasn't reaching for anything. He wasn't getting in or out. He was just standing there, looking. His face was hard to see under the parking lot's dim lighting, but his posture was rigid, and he didn't move a muscle when I made eye contact. I gave a polite nod, more out of instinct than anything, and turned back to the machine, grabbing my drink with shaking hands. As I turned to walk back to my room, I glanced again, and he was still watching me. No change in position, no acknowledgement, just that unwavering gaze. I walked faster, the gravel crunching louder under my feet now. I didn't run, but every step felt longer than the last. I made it to my door, unlocked it quickly and stepped inside, locking it behind me before even turning on the light. I peered through the curtains, but he was gone. His car was still there, the door now shut, but the man was nowhere to be seen. I told myself to calm down. Maybe I'd caught him in a weird moment. Maybe he was just tired or confused. Still, something about the way he moved, or didn't move, left me shaken. I turned on the television and tried to distract myself with noise, but sleep wouldn't come easy that night. About an hour later, I was half dozing, wrapped tightly in the motel blanket, when I heard it, soft footsteps just outside my door. They were slow, deliberate, not passing by but lingering. I held my breath. My room had a window, but the curtain was closed. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to move. Then came the knock. Not loud, not frantic. Just one knock. Then silence. I didn't answer. Another knock followed, just as soft, almost uncertain. I crept out of bed and grabbed my phone, dialing 911 without turning on the lights. I whispered to the dispatcher that someone was outside my room, knocking softly, and that I didn't feel safe. She stayed on the line with me as I whispered updates. The knocking stopped. The footsteps returned, fading into the distance. The police arrived less than 10 minutes later. I peeked through the curtain when I saw the flashing lights. 2 officers were at the front desk talking to the clerk, then making their way around the lot. They didn't knock on my door, but I watched as they went to the car that had been parked near mine. They shined their flashlights into it. Then they opened the door. One of them called something out, but I couldn't hear what. Eventually they returned to the front office. I waited until morning to check out, keeping the deadbolt locked and the lights on all night. When I turned in my key, I asked the front desk if everything was okay with the man in the car. The clerk gave me a look I'll never forget, half annoyance, half unease. "He's not staying here," he said quietly. He wasn't on the guest list. I got into my car and drove off without another word. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight until I reached the next town. The whole drive I kept looking in my mirrors, half expecting that same blue car to appear behind me. That same cold face staring straight ahead. I never saw him again, and I never found out why he was there. The idea that he wasn't staying at the motel, that he had just parked there and sat silently watching from the shadows, still chills me. What was he waiting for? Why my door? Why that gentle, deliberate knock? And how long had he been standing there before he made a sound? Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I had opened the door. If I had responded to the knock with sleepy confusion or simple politeness. Maybe it would have been nothing. Maybe it would have been something I wouldn't be alive to talk about. Since that night, I've been more careful. I no longer stay in roadside motels when I travel. I book well-lit hotels with lobbies and multiple floors. I park near entrances. I double-check locks. I trust my instincts even when they whisper quietly, because sometimes, when the world seems quiet and calm, there are people out there who are simply waiting, watching, choosing, and you may never know why they chose your door to knock on, softly, in the middle of the night. Story 3. The house with no lights on. It was supposed to be a simple visit, one of those polite weekend get-togethers that you agree to more out of obligation than excitement. I had a friend from college who had recently moved out into the countryside with her new fiancé. They'd bought an old farmhouse nestled at the end of a long gravel road, flanked by open fields and a few clusters of trees. She was proud of the place, always sending photos of her kitchen renovations, or the garden she'd started in the backyard. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year, so I accepted her invitation to spend a Saturday night there, promising to bring some wine and catch up like old times. I left the city in the late afternoon and arrived just after dusk, the sun sinking low behind the horizon as my tires crunched along the winding road that led to the property. That's when I noticed something strange. The house was completely dark. No porch light, no interior glow through the windows, not even a flicker from a television or appliance. I checked my phone, thinking maybe I had the wrong day or time, but everything lined up. I had confirmed the visit the day before. I pulled into the driveway, the house looming ahead like a black silhouette against the evening sky. I sat there for a minute, engine idling, unsure of what to do. Maybe they were running late, maybe they'd gone into town and would be back soon. But her car was there, parked off to the side, half obscured by overgrown bushes. That's when I noticed the front door. It was open. Not wide open, but just slightly ajar, like someone had stepped outside and forgotten to close it all the way. A soft creak as the breeze shifted it back and forth. I turned off the engine. I got out, stepping slowly toward the house, calling her name. No answer. The gravel shifted under my feet as I approached the porch, and a faint scent of dust and something else, something like damp wood, hung in the air. I pushed the door open gently, peering into the darkness beyond. "Hello," I said, voice wavering. Still no response. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the foyer. The furniture was there, the couch and coffee table just as she had showed me in photos. But something felt wrong. The place was too quiet. There were no signs of dinner being prepared, no music, no clinking of dishes, just stillness. I stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight. My light passed over the walls and shelves. Everything seemed intact, but cold, untouched, like no one had lived here for weeks. I walked farther into the house, calling out again, louder this time. Still nothing. I reached the kitchen and stopped. Plates were set on the table, 2 of them. A half-full glass of water, a knife and fork placed neatly beside each plate. But the food was untouched, congealed and dry, like it had been left out too long. I reached down and touched the edge of one plate. Cold. I turned toward the hallway that led to the back of the house, toward the bedrooms. The door at the end of the hall was shut. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed not to open it. I took a step closer, then another. The hallway felt longer than it should have, each step heavy, like I was walking underwater. I reached the door and slowly turned the knob. It was unlocked. The room inside was dark, like the rest of the house. My flashlight beam shook as I raised it. The bed was made, neatly tucked and untouched. A pair of shoes sat by the dresser, laces perfectly aligned. On the wall I saw a photo of my friend and her fiancé, smiling in front of the very same house. It looked recent. I was just starting to back away when I heard something upstairs. A soft creak, like a floorboard shifting under someone's weight. I froze, my pulse pounding in my ears. I hadn't even considered that someone could be up there. I stood completely still, straining to hear more. Nothing. Then, another creak, closer this time. I turned off the flashlight instinctively, as if the darkness might somehow protect me. I listened again. Then, from the top of the stairs, a voice. It was her voice, my friend's. She called my name, soft and hesitant, like she was unsure I was really there. I turned slowly and moved toward the stairs, whispering her name in return. "Are you okay?" I asked. No answer. Just another creak. I started up the steps, each one groaning beneath me. My phone's battery flashed red, 10%. I ignored it. At the top, the hallway stretched ahead, with several doors lining each side. A dim glow came from the last one on the right. I walked toward it, calling her name again. I reached a door and gently pushed it open. The room was empty. Just a dresser, a chair, and an unmade bed. The window was open, curtains fluttering in the breeze, but no one was there. I turned around, heart sinking. That's when I saw the footprints, muddy, bare footprints leading from the bedroom into the hallway, down the stairs. My own prints were beside them, shoe prints, but the bare ones were fresh, glistening slightly in the dim light from the window. I hurried downstairs, calling her name again, now in a near panic. I checked the kitchen, the living room, every room I'd already seen. Still no sign of her. The front door was now wide open. I stepped outside, my light sweeping across the yard. Nothing. No sound. No movement. I stood there in the doorway for what felt like an hour, unsure what to do. Eventually I got back in my car, locked the doors, and drove away. I called the police once I got to the nearest gas station. They took my report, said they would send someone to check the house. I waited there until an officer met me in person. They searched the property but found nothing unusual. No one was home. The car I had seen was registered to someone in the next county. The officer said the house had been vacant for over 3 months. The couple who had lived there, my friend and her fiancé, had disappeared. No signs of struggle, no forwarding address. Their belongings were still in the house, but there had been no activity on their phones or bank accounts. The officer didn't say much else, just thanked me for the report and advised I steer clear of the property in the future. I drove home that night, rattled and confused. I'd tried calling her number again. Disconnected. I tried messaging her online, nothing. Over the next few weeks I kept checking the news, expecting a story to break. But nothing came. It was like they had never existed. Even now, I don't know what happened that night. I don't know why the house was dark or why the dinner table had been set as if they had just stepped away. I don't know what that voice was that called my name from upstairs or whose footprints those were. Maybe it was her. Maybe she was hiding. Maybe she'd been trying to warn me. Or maybe I was too late. All I know is that house still shows up on maps. It still looks lived in from the outside, but no one answers the door. And if you drive past late at night, you'll see the windows staring back, like empty eyes, quiet, still, and waiting. Story 4. The van that followed us. It was supposed to be just another late-night drive. My friend Chelsea and I had a habit of going on nighttime drives to clear our heads or talk about life when everything else felt too loud. There's something about long stretches of road under the stars that makes conversations deeper and silences more comforting. That night, we had no destination in mind. We simply pointed the car west and kept going. The roads were mostly empty, with the occasional pair of headlights appearing far behind us and disappearing just as quickly. We had the music playing low, the windows cracked just enough to let in the cool night air, and no one expecting us home for hours. It felt peaceful. The kind of peace you only find in the in-between hours, when the world sleeps and the roads belong to you. We had no idea that something else was moving along those roads too, watching, waiting, trailing, just behind the veil of comfort we thought we had. It started off subtle. A van, an older model, white with no visible logos. pulled out behind us from a side road about 30 minutes into our drive. At first we didn't think much of it. Vehicles came and went on these roads. But after a while Chelsea noticed it was still behind us, keeping pace even when we changed speeds. "You think they're following us?" she asked with a nervous laugh. I shook my head, probably just headed in the same direction. That answer worked for a few more miles. Then we took a random turn onto a quieter road, one we hadn't planned to take. The van turned too. That's when the unease started creeping in. We slowed down. The van slowed. We sped up. The van sped up. There was no mistaking it now. I tried to brush it off. Maybe the driver lived out here. Maybe they were lost. Maybe they had no idea we even existed. But when we made another random turn, this time onto a narrow gravel road, and the van followed yet again, that hope died. It was close now, closer than before. The headlights didn't flicker or shift as if the driver were trying to pass. "What do we do?" Chelsea whispered. Her voice had lost its playfulness. It was quiet, frightened. I told her we'd head to the nearest gas station or lit area, anywhere public. But there was nothing nearby, just trees and fields and miles of blackness. The GPS barely worked. The bars on our phones were vanishing. The world was shrinking down to a strip of gravel, our tail lights, and those unblinking beams behind us. That's when we saw it. An old roadside rest stop with a single streetlight flickering overhead. It was empty, but the lights worked, and there were vending machines and benches. We pulled in fast and stopped. The van didn't. It slowed at the turnoff, paused, then kept going, just like that. It disappeared down the road without another glance. We sat there, in stunned silence. Chelsea's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. "Was that it?" she asked. "Was that just some weird coincidence?" I didn't answer. We waited a few more minutes, expecting the van to come back, to circle around. But it didn't. The silence returned, thick and loud. Eventually we got out, stretched our legs, and tried to shake the feeling that something had brushed too close. We lingered at the rest stop longer than we needed to. There was something about the light, the safety it gave us after miles of darkness. Eventually, though, we had to leave. We agreed to take the main highway back instead of the back roads, thinking the well-lit path would be safer. We got back into the car, pulled out, and began the drive home. And for a while it was quiet, peaceful even. We didn't speak much. The music played softly again, but the mood had shifted. Every time headlights appeared in the distance behind us, we tensed. Most passed, some turned off. None matched the old white van. We were starting to relax when Chelsea glanced in the mirror and whispered, "No way." I looked. It was the same van, same shape, same dirty white panels, same slightly crooked headlight. It was behind us again, several car lengths back but closing the distance slowly. "How did they catch up?" I asked. We hadn't stopped that long, and they'd driven away in a completely different direction. It didn't make sense, unless they hadn't gone far, unless they'd been waiting, watching. We didn't have time to debate. Chelsea slammed her foot on the gas and we surged forwards. The van followed, not speeding recklessly but never letting us get too far ahead. It was steady, deliberate, as if it had done this before, as if this was all part of some routine. We drove like that for miles. Every time we thought we'd lost them, every time we passed another car or rounded a bend, the van would reappear, unshaken, unhurried, just there, following. We finally reached the outskirts of the nearest town, lights dotting the horizon like little stars of safety. We turned onto a busier street, aiming for the police station. Chelsea had looked it up during the drive. The van followed us all the way to the next intersection, then turned. It vanished down a side road without signalling, without hesitation. We kept driving until we reached the station, pulled into the lot and sat there for 10 minutes just breathing. We didn't go inside. We didn't file a report. What would we say? A van followed us but never spoke to us or did anything illegal. We got home safely that night, but the fear lingered. I thought it might fade with time. It didn't. Chelsea sold her car a few months later. Not because of the van, she said, but I always wondered. I started carrying pepper spray, checking my mirrors constantly, avoiding late-night drives. We never saw the van again, never got a license plate, never even saw the driver's face, but we felt him, or whoever it was, watching, calculating, waiting for something. I still don't know what they wanted. Maybe it was just a scare. Maybe they were playing some twisted game. Or maybe we interrupted something darker, something that could have ended differently if we'd chosen another road, another rest stop, another turn. It taught me something I haven't forgotten. Sometimes danger doesn't announce itself with screams or flashing lights. Sometimes it trails behind you quietly for miles. It waits until your guard is down. It mimics normalcy, just enough to make you doubt your instincts. But your instincts, they know. Listen to them. We got lucky that night. We had a place to turn off, a place with light. Not everyone does. Some people take the next turn and the van follows. And they don't get to tell their story. We did. And now we look over our shoulders a little more carefully. Because once you've been followed by something that didn't want to be seen, you never really forget what that kind of silence feels like. Story 5. The Thing in the Field. There's a stretch of highway not too far from where I grew up. One of those long, lonely roads that cuts through miles of farmland and open prairie. If you've ever driven through the Midwest at night, you know the kind of emptiness I'm talking about. No streetlights, no buildings, just the hum of the engine, the occasional flicker of headlights in the distance, and the vast, inky blackness of the sky swallowing up everything else. I had driven that road more times than I could count. It was part of the route between my hometown and the city I went to college in. Over the years it had become familiar, almost comforting. But on one particular night, years ago, just after I'd graduated, it turned into something else entirely. Something I still don't have a name for. It was late, around midnight. I had left a friend's place after staying longer than I planned. I wasn't tired, just distracted, my mind drifting as the miles passed beneath me. There was something strangely serene about being out there alone, just me and the road. I rolled the windows down to let the breeze in and turned off the radio to enjoy the silence. About halfway through the drive, I noticed something odd in the distance. Off to the right, far out in one of the open fields, at first, it looked like a small light bobbing up and down, like someone walking with a flashlight. That didn't make much sense. There were no houses around for miles. I kept glancing over, curious. The light wasn't moving toward the road, it just hovered there, pulsing faintly, like it was tethered to something deep in the earth. I drove on, trying to shake the sense of unease that crept into my chest. But then, just as I passed a small rise in the landscape, I saw something else. Not the light this time, but a shape, standing just off the road. It looked human, but not quite. Too tall, too thin. The limbs were long, hanging low, and the head seemed to tilt slightly, like it was listening. I passed it in a flash, barely caught the details, but my breath caught in my throat. I slowed down instinctively, looking in the rear-view mirror, but the figure was already gone. I kept driving. I wanted to stop, to turn around and look again, but something in my gut told me not to. That part of the brain that still remembers ancient dangers was screaming at me to keep going, so I did. The road twisted and dipped, taking me farther from whatever I had just seen. But the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it grew, like I was being followed, not by something driving behind me, but by something older, quieter, something watching from the fields. I kept checking the mirrors, glancing at the edges of the road, expecting to see that same figure again. For a while, nothing happened. Then, about 20 minutes later, I saw another light. This one was on the road itself, ahead of me. A soft, blue-white glow, faint and low to the ground, like fog that had learned how to shine. As I approached, it vanished. No flicker, no fade, just gone. I passed the spot cautiously, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, scanning the darkness on both sides. Then the engine sputtered. Just once, a sharp, hollow cough from beneath the hood. I tensed. The car didn't stop, but it hesitated, as if something had briefly reached inside and tried to pull the life out of it. I pressed the gas harder, and the car responded, but I didn't feel better. In fact, I felt like I was being herded, like something wanted me to speed up. So I didn't. I took my foot off the gas and coasted for a bit, trying to stay calm. That's when I saw it again. The figure. This time, closer. It was standing in a ditch just off the left side of the road, closer to the car than before. I caught only a glimpse, but enough to see that it hadn't moved. It was waiting. Always. I passed it again, heart hammering. I was halfway between towns now, no exits, no shoulders wide enough to stop safely. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and all I could think about was how far it was to the next intersection. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the light was a trick of the atmosphere, and the figure was just a scarecrow or fence post. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. This wasn't imagination, this wasn't tired eyes, it was something real. And it was following me. Not like a car follows, not like a person follows, but like a thought that won't leave your head. A shadow just out of reach. Eventually the lights of a gas station came into view. I pulled in fast, heart racing, and parked under the buzzing fluorescent lamps. I sat there for a long time, not moving, watching the road behind me. Nothing followed. No lights, no shapes, no sound. I got out, walked into the store, and bought a drink I didn't want just to hear another human voice. The clerk said I looked pale. I said I was just tired. I didn't tell him what I saw. I didn't tell anyone, not for a long time. Because what do you say? That something followed you across 30 miles of open farmland? That you saw a light in the middle of nowhere and a creature too tall to be a man? That your car tried to quit when it passed that thing in the ditch? I got back in the car and drove the rest of the way with the interior lights on and the radio turned up. Nothing else happened. No more lights, no more figures. But even after I got home, even after I locked the doors and checked the windows, the feeling lingered, like something had marked me, like I had passed through a place I wasn't supposed to enter. I didn't take that highway for a long time afterward. I found alternate routes, longer ones, just to avoid that road. I told myself it was silly, but I did it anyway. Because there's a part of you that remembers fear in a way logic can't touch. A part that still glances into fields and wonders if something is standing there in the dark. Now, years later, I sometimes catch myself thinking about that night. I wonder what would have happened if I had stopped the car, if I had gotten out, if I had walked toward the light instead of away from it. I still don't know what it was. A ghost, a hallucination, something older, something from the earth. Maybe it wasn't meant to be understood. Maybe it was just meant to be seen, remembered, passed along in whispers and quiet stories told late at night. All I know is this: if you ever find yourself alone on that road and you see something in the field, don't stop. Don't get curious. Just keep driving. And don't look back. Story 6. The face in the mirror that wasn't mine. It started with something so small that I didn't even register it at first. A flicker of movement at the edge of a reflection. I was brushing my teeth late one night, standing over the sink in my apartment bathroom. The light was harsh overhead, bright fluorescent strips that buzzed faintly whenever the fan was off. I leaned in close to rinse, eyes half lidded from the weight of the day, when something caught my attention. Just a flash in the mirror behind me, quick as a blink. I turned around, but nothing was there. Just my bathroom wall, the beige towel rack, and the quiet stillness of a late hour. I laughed at myself, chalked it up to exhaustion, and turned off the light before heading to bed. But even as I drifted to sleep, I couldn't shake the unease, like a forgotten whisper brushing against my shoulder. Over the next week, it happened again. Not every night, and never quite the same, but enough that I began to notice a pattern. Sometimes it was in the mirror above the sink. Other times it was the hallway mirror near my front door. Always a brief flicker, a movement that didn't line up with my own, something too quick, too subtle to trace. I'd catch a glimpse as I walked past, an extra tilt of the head, a second reflection lagging just half a beat behind. I told myself it was a trick of the light, or fatigue, or maybe just paranoia. Mirrors play strange games when you're not paying attention. But something deeper in me was unsettled, like my reflection wasn't always behaving the way it should, like it was pretending to be me, but not doing a very good job. The tipping point came one evening when I returned home from work, dropped my bag by the door and made my way to the bathroom. I flipped on the light and looked up and saw myself, already looking back. Not turning to look, not catching my reflection as I moved. No, this was different. My reflection was already staring at me the moment the light came on, as though it had been waiting for me to arrive, and the expression it wore wasn't mine. It wasn't neutral or tired or reflective of the mood I was in. It was a soft smile, strange, detached, and entirely out of place. I blinked and it was gone, just my own reflection again, matching me in every way. But I couldn't shake what I'd seen. I stood there for a long time, watching myself, daring something to move out of sync. After that night, things got worse. I started leaving the bathroom light on, afraid of catching another glimpse in the dark. I avoided the hallway mirror altogether, but even then, I felt it watching. Not all the time, just in brief pulses, like it was peeking out to check if I was paying attention. I stopped trusting mirrors. I covered the one in my bedroom. I kept the hallway lights dim. But no matter what I did, the feeling followed. I'd catch myself pausing by the microwave or the window at night, seeing my own face staring back with just enough delay to feel unnatural. Sometimes the reflection was perfect, other times it wasn't. A raised eyebrow I hadn't lifted, lips moving slightly after mine had already stopped, a smile that didn't belong to the moment. Then came the night it spoke. I was brushing my teeth again, head down, foam gathering in the corners of my mouth. I wasn't even looking at the mirror this time. I had learned to avoid eye contact. But I heard it, my voice, low and calm, saying a word I didn't recognize. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, just a soft murmur, barely louder than a breath. I jerked my head up, mouth still full of toothpaste, and stared at the mirror. My reflection stared back, perfectly synchronized. No movement, no smile, just me. I spat into the sink, wiped my face, and left the bathroom without turning off the light. I didn't go back in that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, that it was a sound from the pipes, a trick of acoustics. Anything but what it really felt like. I started researching. I read about mirror folklore, old myths about reflections holding more than just your image. I came across stories of doppelgangers, shadow selves, parallel dimensions bleeding through surfaces of glass. Most of it sounded like campfire tales, exaggerated and dramatized. But one line stood out to me. Mirrors are not portals, they are prisons. Something about that phrasing hit me hard. What if whatever was behind that glass wasn't trying to get out? What if it was trying to trade places? Watching, mimicking, waiting for the right moment to make its move. I started sleeping with the door closed. Towels hung over every reflective surface. My apartment looked like a haunted set piece. But at least I felt like I was taking control. Until the night I forgot. I had just gotten out of the shower. Steam filled the room. My head was down, towel draped around my shoulders, and I glanced up instinctively at the mirror before realizing it wasn't covered. What I saw stopped me cold. My reflection was dry. No steam, no towel. Just me, completely dry, wearing the clothes I had just taken off. And it was smiling. Not a big, evil grin. Just that same soft, detached smile. It raised its hand slowly, like it was trying to wave, or mimic me waving. I raised mine in return, slowly, hesitantly, and the reflection's hand met mine perfectly. For a moment it looked like a mirror should, perfectly aligned. But then it blinked. One eye, left then right, a blink I never made. I backed away, heart pounding, and the mirror fogged up in an instant, obscuring the image. I threw the towel over it and left the room without looking back. I moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't explain why. I told friends it was time for a change, that I needed a bigger place, that the building had plumbing issues, anything but the truth. I threw away every mirror I owned. I avoided polished surfaces. Even phone screens at night made me flinch. And yet, even now, in moments of distraction, I'll catch something. A flicker in the window, a shape too close behind me in a selfie, a pause between my movements and what I see reflected. I don't know what it is or what it wants. I just know it's patient. It watches. And sometimes it smiles. Now, in the quiet of my new place, with fewer mirrors and more lamps, I try to tell myself it's over, that I left it behind, but deep down I know better. Whatever it is, whatever version of me is watching from behind the glass, it's still there, still waiting. And every time I catch my reflection out of the corner of my eye, I wonder if this time, finally, it won't look away. Story 7. The camper in the woods who wasn't there. A few years ago, I decided to take a solo camping trip for the first time. I'd always loved the outdoors, and after a few stressful months at work, I wanted nothing more than a few days of solitude beneath the trees, disconnected from everything. I picked a state park I had visited once before, remote, sprawling, and threaded with trails that branched deep into the forest. It wasn't the most popular place, and that was exactly what I wanted. I packed my gear, left early in the morning, and arrived at the trailhead by noon. The sun was high, and the air was filled with birdsong and the rustle of leaves. I felt free in a way I hadn't for months. I hiked for a few hours until I reached a small clearing just off the main path. It was perfect. The trees formed a natural barrier on all sides, and a little stream trickled nearby. I set up camp, built a small fire, and settled in. The first night was peaceful. I cooked a simple meal, read for a bit under the lantern light, and crawled into my tent just as the sky began to darken. The sounds of the forest were soft and soothing. Crickets, wind, the occasional owl. I drifted to sleep quickly. Sometime around 2 a.m. I woke up for no particular reason. The fire had burned out, and the woods had fallen silent. Completely silent. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was the faint glow of a fire through the trees, not mine but another, off in the distance. It hadn't been there before. I sat up slowly, unsure whether to be curious or alarmed. There were no other campsites nearby, at least none that I had passed. I hadn't seen another person all day. Still, I told myself someone else must have arrived late, a fellow hiker. Maybe they just picked a nearby spot. I lay back down and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. The light from the fire flickered faintly against the walls of my tent, and every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone sitting out there, watching. By morning, the firelight was gone. I got up, brewed some coffee over the ashes of my own fire, and walked toward the place where I had seen the glow. It was only about a 5-minute walk, but when I reached the spot, I found nothing. No fire pit, no logs, no gear, no footprints, no signs that anyone had been there at all. The ground was undisturbed, the leaves intact. I stood there for a long time listening to the breeze move through the trees, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. Maybe I had dreamed it, I thought. Maybe I'd just woken up disoriented and confused. Still, the silence stayed with me. That afternoon, I decided to hike farther along the trail just to clear my head. I took my pack and wandered for hours, losing track of time. It wasn't until the light started to fade that I turned back. When I reached my campsite, I immediately sensed something was wrong. My tent flap was open. I was certain I had zipped it shut. I always did. I walked closer, heart pounding. Nothing was missing, nothing disturbed. But inside the tent, on top of my sleeping bag, was a small stone, perfectly round, placed gently in the center. I didn't recognize it. I hadn't collected any rocks. I hadn't seen any like it around. It wasn't large, just smooth and dark, but its presence chilled me. I hadn't been gone more than 4 hours. Someone had been there. Someone had entered my tent and left something behind. I considered leaving that night, but part of me didn't want to give in to fear. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe another hiker found the camp and thought it was funny. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random, that the rock had meaning. I kept it, placed it in my pack, and zipped the tent up tight. I didn't sleep much. Every sound outside made me freeze. Every shadow looked wrong, but the night passed without incident. In the morning, I decided to hike out early. The forest didn't feel welcoming anymore. As I packed my gear, I noticed something else. A second rock, smaller than the first, had been placed at the edge of my fire pit. I hadn't seen it there the night before. It hadn't been there when I went to sleep. Someone had returned. Again, I found no prints, no marks, no indication of who it might have been. I hiked back quickly, constantly checking over my shoulder. The forest was quiet again, but not in the calming way it had been. It felt watchful, like it had turned inward. When I reached my car, I tossed my pack inside and locked the doors immediately. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced back toward the trailhead. A figure stood at the edge of the trees, distant, motionless, too far to see clearly, but I could feel their gaze. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just drove. For the first time in my life, I felt like the woods hadn't just been empty. They had been waiting. And whatever had watched me wasn't trying to scare me. It had been observing, choosing, measuring something I didn't understand. Weeks passed before I could talk about it. When I finally told a friend, he half joked that maybe it was a local cryptid or spirit, but I could see in his eyes that he was unnerved. We did some research, found old local legends, stories of forest spirits that leave tokens to mark those they've seen. Warnings, claims, gifts, depends on who you ask. Some said if you took the tokens home, bad luck followed. Others said the rocks were meant to keep you safe. I didn't know which to believe. I kept both stones in a drawer for a while. Then one day, without knowing why, I drove to a river outside town and tossed them both in. The moment they sank, I felt something release, like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I haven't gone camping alone since. I still hike, still love the woods, but I don't stay after dark and I never sleep out there alone anymore. Whatever I saw, whoever was watching, it wasn't human. Or, if it was, it had long since stopped being just that. I still think about the rocks, the firelight, the figure at the tree line. I wonder how many others have seen it, have felt what I did. Maybe they kept the stones. Maybe they understood something I didn't. Or maybe they never made it out at all. All I know is, if you're ever camping deep in the woods and you find something in your tent that you didn't leave there, leave it behind. Don't take it with you. Don't carry it home. Because some gifts aren't given, they're left. Story 8. The wrong cabin in the snow. It was supposed to be a weekend retreat, just a few friends getting together after months of distance and missed plans. We had rented a cabin in the mountains, far from the city, nestled deep in a forest where snow fell early and the silence wrapped around you like a thick, old quilt. It had been booked months in advance, a rustic spot that promised privacy, wood-burning heat, and no cell service. That was part of the appeal. A chance to disconnect, to drink hot cocoa by the fire, play board games and laugh about old memories. We caravanned up together, 2 cars, 6 of us total, arriving just as the sun was setting behind the white-capped pines. The road was narrow with just enough room for our tyres to crunch over the hard-packed snow. When we reached the cabin, it looked even more beautiful than the photos. Wood siding dusted with frost, smoke already curling from the chimney, a light on in the window. Everything seemed perfect. At least, at first. We parked, unloaded our bags and trudged through the snow to the porch, laughing and shivering as we hurried inside. The door was unlocked, and a faint smell of pine and cedar greeted us. The heat was already on. One of us joked that the owners must have been thoughtful to prep the place early. We dropped our gear in the front room and explored. Everything felt right. Warm throws on the couches, a fire crackling in the hearth, mugs already lined up on the kitchen shelf. Someone called dibs on the upstairs bedroom, someone else claimed the loft. We settled in fast, cooking dinner, playing cards and watching the snow begin to fall harder through the windows. But something small started to bother me, just a little detail. The guest book on the entry table. It was open, but the last entry was dated over a year ago. I pointed it out half-jokingly. Guess this place doesn't get much traffic, but no one seemed to mind. Maybe it was cleaned out recently, or maybe the last few guests hadn't bothered to sign. I let it go, but as the evening wore on, more details emerged. The paintings on the wall didn't match the listing photos. The furniture was older, heavier, the dishes and the cabinets were mismatched, chipped. It all still worked, but it felt lived in, more like someone's personal retreat than a rental. We began to wonder aloud if we were in the right place. One of my friends went outside to check the GPS and address. No service, of course, but the directions we'd followed had taken us to the right spot. Still, the doubt lingered. That night, after we had all gone to our rooms, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled softly outside, brushing snow against the windows. But it wasn't the wind that kept me awake. It was the footsteps. Soft, deliberate footsteps creaking across the floorboards downstairs. I lay still, holding my breath, listening as they moved slowly through the living room, pausing near the fireplace, then crossing toward the kitchen. I told myself it was one of the others, maybe someone getting a glass of water or putting more wood on the fire. But I heard no clinking of glasses, no rustling of wood, just the slow, even sound of steps that didn't quite match the rhythm of someone half asleep. Then silence. I waited for the creak of the stairs, for the sound of someone returning to bed, but it never came. In the morning, I asked casually who had been up during the night. No one admitted to it. One friend said they hadn't slept well, but they'd stayed in bed the whole time. Another mentioned hearing the wind, but nothing else. I didn't push it. Maybe I had dreamed it. Maybe the old floorboards were shifting in the cold. But when I went downstairs, I noticed something strange. One of the chairs at the kitchen table was turned slightly, angled away from the other. It was subtle, but it hadn't been like that the night before. I straightened it and didn't say anything. We spent the day outside, building a snowman, throwing snowballs, laughing like kids again. The sun broke through the clouds, and everything felt lighter, normal. We went back inside just before dusk, and the moment we walked through the door, I knew something had changed. The firewood we had stacked by the hearth was gone. Not all of it, just a few pieces. No one had burned them. We hadn't lit the fire since the night before. We asked around, teasingly at first, but everyone swore they hadn't touched it. That night we lit the fire again anyway, played cards, drank hot cider, tried not to think about it. But as the last few of us lingered near the fire, my friend Jamie asked, "Hey, did we ever see the rental key?" We all looked at each other. No one had used a key to enter. The door had been unlocked. We assumed it was left open for us, but none of us had found a key in the usual places, under the mat, in a box, in a drawer. There had been no note, no welcome message, just that empty guest book with the year-old signature. We fell into a quiet unease. We decided to leave the next morning. The snow had stopped. The road would be clearer, and no one wanted to spend another night in the house that felt less and less like it belonged to us. We packed quickly and quietly. As we stepped out onto the porch, bags slung over shoulders, I turned for one last glance at the cabin, and there, in the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure, not clear, not detailed, just the impression of someone standing behind the curtain, watching us leave. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't say anything, just got in the car and didn't look back again. We drove in silence until we hit the main road. Then the jokes started. Nervous laughter, half-serious comments about how we probably broke into someone's house by accident. Back in the city, we checked the listing again. Same address, same map, but the photos didn't match. We contacted the host, confused. She replied the next day, thanking us for the stay and saying she hoped everything had gone smoothly. When we asked about the decor and guest book, she brushed it off, said she hadn't updated the photos in a while and that she'd stopped keeping the book out. But we couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't been alone that weekend, that the cabin hadn't just been rented out to us, it had been borrowed from something or someone that still considered it home. And maybe they didn't mind the company, or maybe they had just been waiting for us to leave. It's been years, and we still talk about that trip sometimes, usually with a laugh, like it was just one of those weird things that happens when you're out in the middle of nowhere. But every now and then, one of us will pause a little too long, like we're remembering something unspoken. The footsteps, the missing firewood, the figure in the window. And always, that question hangs in the air. If that wasn't the rental cabin, whose was it?